Let's be honest. Shopping, not my thing. I go to the store. There's a lot of people there. It's just not my thing. It's not football. All right. I spend way too long scrolling websites just looking for something simple like a nice pair of jeans. And I'm either overwhelmed by all the choices or can't find anything my style and end up with stuff that doesn't fit and doesn't work. That's why I use Stitch Fix. You just take a quick style quiz, share your size, your vibe, and your budget, and boom, you're matched with a real human stylists who handle the rest. They take care of the work for you. They send you a fix box with clothes that actually fit and make sense for your life, work, weekends, whatever. It saves you time. You look great, and you don't even have to think about it. That's the best part. It's no risk, all style. Try it all on in the comfort of your home. Keep what works, send back the rest. Free shipping and returns, always, and no subscription required. Plus, get a free try-on for your first fix. Get started today at stitchfix.com/podcast to get $20 off your first order, and they'll waive your styling fee. That's stitchfix.com/podcast.
Listen, life's all about leveling up. Whether you're handling business on the field or kicking it in your zone, you like to celebrate with cigars that match the moment. That's why you should link up with Famous Cigars to bring you a wild deal. Right now, you can grab 8 premium cigars for just $8. You heard that right. 8 top-rated cigars at $1 a stick. Top quality brands like Oliva, Romeo y Julieta, and Davidoff. Handpicked just for you and worth over $80. Hit up famouscigars.com/cam and lock in this exclusive deal. While you're there, check out their insane selection of premium cigars, all shipped fresh and fast from their massive 20,000 square foot humidor. That's half a football field. Famous Cigars has been in the game since 1939 and still family owned. So celebrate every win with the folks at Famous. 8 cigars for $8. famouscigars.com/cam.
What's up, y'all? It's Drewski, and I've teamed up with Mountain Dew to produce a hilarious new basketball podcast called The Dew Zone with Drewski. Learn the backstories of your favorite ballers and celebrities like Jamal Murray. Did you have like a favorite team? Was it the Raptors at the time or no? Was the Raptors even started around that time?
Come on, bro. I ain't that old, fam. You talking like I was 50.
Taylor Rooks, Asia Wilson, and many more. You won't want to miss this. Listen to The Dew Zone with Drewski on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to podcasts.
The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast.
Come on now. We know the threes, but now he just shot. What's the deal with these point guards? 2021. What? Little to little hoops all night. First it was Lillard, then Steph. Now you're telling me CP3?
Welcome to the Timeline of Phoenix Suns podcast. Midseason is here. The very boring All-Star game has ended. My name is Mike. I'm here with Sam. Sam, how you doing?
That's a little harsh.
It was awful. I didn't have fun at all.
You didn't have fun at all? Not even a little?
The Chris Paul dunk was kind of exciting, but
and
it wasn't
no
close.
respect. No respect, first of all. No respect for Chris Paul setting the all-time assist record.
Yeah, I mean, that was fine, but it's as easy as it possibly gets when they're not defending Giannis at the rim. I mean, I could get an assist in that scenario. Not to say that what Chris Paul didn't do or did do wasn't impressive. It's just no defense.
I think the game was good. I think the Elam ending is still fantastic as an idea. It's not, it's only Kevin Durant's fault that he drafted a trash team.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought the game was good. And now, the other events I could have done without, but I know we're not going to have an extended All-Star conversation here, but just quickly, I don't know how you save what are typically the All-Star Saturday night events. I don't know how to make it interesting at this point.
Yeah, I don't really know how to fix those either. I kind of enjoy the three-point contest still. That one doesn't really... The dunk contest is I mean, it's hard to say that the dunk contest is boring because it'll be boring for 4 years in a row, and then you'll have Aaron Gordon and Zach LaVine. Like, that's just kind of, it just ebbs and flows with how exciting it can be. Every once in a while, you'll get somebody that's exciting. This year, pretty boring. The skills challenge, pretty boring. I will say that adding big men to the skills challenge did make it more interesting because
God,
it's just,
the skills challenge was so boring.
it's boring.
Come on.
Yeah, it's boring, but it's cool. It's cool to see big men that can do that because
it's like every big
before.
except DeAndre Ayton does that now.
Yeah, I guess it's true. I mean, it would be it'd be funny to see Andre Drummond out there trying to make those passes and dribble.
You gotta make it harder. Like whether it's guards or bigs, you have to make that event harder.
I got an idea. Put Mikal Bridges and Jay Crowder out there guarding them at the rim and tracking them around those cones.
Yeah.
Then it's interesting. Maybe you put big men in there to set screens too. You just go all the way. It's a pick and roll competition. Maybe that's what they should do. There's where Chris Paul could actually win. Missed a layup again. It was funny. Chris Paul, before it started, he was talking to the guys about it. Apparently he had done it 4 times before, and he was like, I can't believe I missed a layup in this competition once before. And then he missed a layup again. A very surprising thing for Chris Paul to do. All right, it is midseason. This team is in a really interesting place. They have a great record. They're the second best team in the league by their actual record, and I think by net rating at this point. At the lowest, they'll be third. I didn't check before this podcast. They look very good, and it's, you and I were talking before we started recording. This is the first time we've really come to like a midseason point where we have a team that looks as good as this team is. So I thought we would come into this podcast and talk about the biggest questions facing the team for the second half of the season. I want to focus on this season because I think there are some interesting long-term questions that we can get to later, but they're not really important to me right now. I want to focus on what this team looks like this season. By the way, Sam, we should talk about this. You and I had a disagreement online that people found interesting that we should probably address. We could actually
so not worth it. Not worth spending a lot of time on this.
We can get to it with one of these questions because I think it falls into one of these questions here. But let's start with, I think, the biggest question facing this team right now. Are the Suns really contenders? And this is, I think, I've sort of said that people need to talk about the Suns as a contender because they meet all the criteria. But I think there's a difference between saying they should be talked about as a contender and can they beat the Lakers and the Clippers in the playoffs, because that's what it's going to take. Now, it's interesting to talk about this now. I know that you have a specific opinion on it that you recently wrote about, but what do you think? Are the Suns contenders?
I think the Suns are contenders. They absolutely deserve to be in the conversation at this point. Now, that being said, just to take a little bit of a statistical approach here, I'm looking at 538, and as you said, I wrote about this topic as well. For most of you, there should be an article on Brightside coming out for me as well today on this very same topic. So I'm looking at 538's website right now. They use their Raptor, that's their advanced stat, player stats in order to project which teams they think are going to finish in what seed and which teams are going to make the finals and which teams are going to win the finals. They have 8 teams with at least a 5% chance of winning the finals right now. And I would circle that entire tier. It's a large tier, granted, 8 teams is a lot. But I think those 8 teams, it's the Clippers, Nuggets, Jazz, Nets, Bucks, Lakers, Sixers, Suns. I think those are the 8 contenders here at the midseason point. And I think the Suns have absolutely done enough to deserve a seat at the table in that conversation. They are not favorites by any means, and we can talk about what it takes to push them there. But yeah, 538 gives them a 5% chance, and I think that sounds about right based on where we are right now.
When you look at the playoff picture right now, here's how I'm looking at it, and I want to get your opinion on this. Fully healthy, the Suns versus the Lakers, it's hard for me to picture a way for the Suns to currently win that matchup. Well, that's just 100% honesty from me. I know some people might not like hearing me say that, but it's just difficult to find a way to compete with the size of Anthony Davis, for one, and his skill set, and LeBron James at the same time. The Suns, say you put Jay Crowder on LeBron, you have Mikal sort of roaming off the ball, and you have Ayton guarding Anthony Davis. Yes, they have Marc Gasol. I'm not entirely worried about Marc Gasol. Yes, if you find a way to put Frank Kaminsky in there, then it's kind of terrifying. But I don't know. It's hard for me because I think there's different kinds of contenders. There's the contenders that fully healthy, every team's fully healthy, they have a chance to make it to the finals. And there's a contenders that it's like the Suns, where I feel like if LeBron rolls his ankle or Anthony Davis rolls his ankle, then the Suns, there's like a really good chance that the Suns could make the finals at that point. But without that, I'm not really sure that they're in a place to be able to do that right now.
Right.
Is that where you're at too, or do you think that fully healthy they have a chance?
And not to distance my own opinion too much, but I think that's reflected in the stat I was just talking about too. Like when 538 with their model says the Suns have a 5% chance of winning the finals. The Suns right now, as you already said, have the second best net rating, maybe the third best net rating. I didn't check either. The second or third best net rating in the NBA. So where's the discrepancy coming from? It's from them assuming that other teams are at full health. And so what we have to admit to ourselves as Suns fans so far is, Devin Booker's missed a few games. He's injured again right now. Dario Saric missed a month. But the Lakers have been without Anthony Davis for a very long time. Brooklyn, if you look across conferences, has barely played any games with all three of their superstars healthy at the same time. So the reason the Suns' probability is kind of pushed down is because you have to factor that in and say that the Suns are contenders. I really do believe that, but they're in that second tier of contenders where they kind of need a sprained ankle or something really to break right for them in order to have a fair, honest chance. And that's what makes it so that even though they're the second or third best record, you would say, okay, why don't they have a 20 or 30% chance of winning? Well, it's because now they have a 5% chance instead, because they need all these other things to go right. Yeah. But even that 5% chance, if we all agree that sounds about right, 5%, that's worth pursuing. 100%. It's right. Still worth pursuing. I'd say this kind of already hits at our next question, so I won't go into it in too much detail right here, but it's worth pursuing as many avenues as possible to increase the talent level on this roster so that you can take that 5% and you can maximize it even more and have as great of a chance as you possibly can of toppling one of those juggernauts, even if they're at full health.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at. I kind of look at the Suns a little bit like Miami last year, to be honest.
Exactly.
And part of me even wonders if you just sort of stack those teams up, this is kind of unfair to Miami, I guess, but if you just stack those teams up next to each other and say which one's better, just with straight up talent, I'd almost be leaning towards the Suns. Maybe not, because Bam is just so good. But
Butler was really good last year, and I think Booker has been good for for about half of the first half of the season.
Yeah.
So I want to see a consistent second half out of Devin Booker before we say that. But in theory, you kind of just line those two teams up, those two rosters on paper, and I can definitely see the argument.
And Chris Paul, I think, is the big difference there, where Chris Paul can just do so much, and he's been so good this season that. I don't know that the Heat really have anybody like him. Goran Dragic may be the best one-to-one comparison. It's not really fair. It'd almost be like you'd be comparing Jimmy Butler to Chris Paul and Devin Booker to Goran Dragic, and I think that's where it kind of, if you just combine those two stars as one, I don't know, it just gets kind of interesting. Bam is the real difference maker there. But yeah, that's kind of the tier of contender that I would look at them, where things could break right and they could make the finals, but they have to break right. And I guess that's the difference between a favorite and a contender.
I mean, it's happened before. It's happened often enough in NBA history. The 2011 Mavericks, the 2004 Pistons. It's the type of thing that maybe it only happens once every 7 or 8 years, but that's often enough that it's worth it.
Yeah,
you got to try.
I guess the question is, what would it take to make them a favorite? I don't know that there's any way to do that in a conference with LeBron James, to be honest. So that's just kind of what it is.
The unfortunate reality of the NBA, even if they got past that team, when you've got Giannis on the other side, and when you've got Harden and Kyrie and KD all teamed up on the same team, I don't think the Suns can become favorites this year if other teams are at full health.
Yeah, and part of the path to make the finals is the right matchups, which is something that as we get closer and closer to the playoffs that we're going to talk about, and I think we do have a question coming up about that. But before we even get there, this kind of plays into this conversation. Should the Suns make a trade is the next question we have on this list. And I think on top of that, are there buyout guys to look at? Basically, is this roster set, or should they shake it up? Because they're playing well right now. Second best record, obviously. You can make a case that they're the second best team based on statistics. Does that matter? Should they make a trade? What do you think?
Yeah. Well, okay. it's a loaded question. You never make a trade just to make a trade. So I want to make that very clear first. Continuity is very important. Part of the reason the Suns are here where they are so far is because of the continuity they've gotten out of building chemistry with those guys. So you don't want to ruin that. That being said, that's my caveat. That's my disclaimer. For the Suns to vault themselves into the next tier of true contenders, they need more talent. And, I look around at the way the Suns fan base is kind of talking about a lot of our players on the roster right now, and I just... I understand why you always want to back your guys. I enjoy watching these guys who have won 24 out of 35 games as much as the next guy. But, trying to make the roster better, you can only have so much loyalty to some of these players. And so, I think I would go back to what our kind of original point was when Chris Paul first got here. We said when Chris Paul first got here, and I believe that James Jones has always believed this, it opens this particular very short championship window with Chris Paul and Devin Booker together on the same team. Those two guys were going to be the system. And I think from the very beginning, James Jones believed the idea is to build around these two and get a championship contender. I didn't always believe that he would actually be able to accomplish it so soon. I kind of thought at the beginning of the season that was just lip service James Jones was paying to us. And, it was going to be a fun, scrappy, upstart kind of team that lost in the first round or whatever. Now that we're actually here and we are actually talking at the midseason point about the Suns being contenders, you take, again, sorry to go back to that same old stat again, but you take that 5% chance you're being given from the advanced models or whatever right now, and you use the opportunity to really think hard about cashing in your chips and finding ways to optimize your roster and bring in more talent. And I don't really care. It's really by any means necessary. I don't care if you have to trade Jalen Smith. I don't care if you have to trade Cam Johnson. I don't care if you have to trade DeAndre Ayton or even Mikal Bridges. I think, honestly, any single piece that the Suns have right now outside of Devin Booker and Chris Paul is on the table. Because if you really believe the answer that we gave to the first question, are the Suns a contender? If you really believe that's a yes, then you recognize the gravity of that situation. You recognize that that's something that, if you're a Suns fan, you've only been able to answer yes to that question once every 15, 20 years. So if you really believe that, you go all in now. And that's not to say blow up the continuity just for fun. Obviously, you don't want to do that. But if the right piece presents itself, and I'm not fully convinced that it has, but if it does, I would make anyone else on the roster is potentially available.
Yeah, I've kind of felt that way since they made the Chris Paul trade. Whether or not I would do it, I've felt that that's how James Jones has viewed it since the beginning. You know that. It was the first thing I said after the trade was made. I think it's actually the way to talk about it in the context of this team is, do I think they will make a trade? At this point, I kind of feel like they won't, and it's only because it's actually pretty difficult to find the right pieces with the contracts that are on this team. Chris Paul eats up so much of the cap. Devin Booker, a huge percentage of it after that. And then you have to put all these different guys together to make trades to find the right guys if they're making any more north of like $8 million. And there's different types of trades that you can talk about. I think PJ Tucker is the type of guy that you hope that nobody wants to trade for. He gets bought out and maybe he's available on the buyout market, and then you can get him with that exception that the Suns held on to. They have a little more money than a absolute minimum to give guys if they want to, but with a biannual exception. Then there's guys like George Hill, where like if you want George Hill, are you willing to put Javon Carter, a second-round pick, and Langston Galloway in there? Maybe they don't want that. Maybe they want Jalen Smith and Javon Carter. Are you willing to do that? That's a question. And maybe they should be. I'm not fully convinced that James Jones would be at this point. I think that he believes in Jalen Smith enough to draft him. And Jalen Smith, came into the league, got COVID right away, and has struggled a little bit since. So it's hard to say that he's had a fair shot. Should that matter? I'm not necessarily sure that it should. Then there's more, right? Then you start saying, well, what about Vucevic? Say Vucevic is available. Do you package DeAndre Ayton for Vucevic? Now, that's a conversation that, would James Jones do that? I'm not really sure. Would I do that? I'm not really sure about that either. Probably not. It's tough to imagine a way that somebody would shake up a team that dramatically at this point of the season. But I'm not fully convinced that James Jones wouldn't do that.
Isn't that what it would take to, if we just admitted, we just conceded, this team has been so good. And this is kind of what has frustrated me a little bit about the conversation. It's not the Suns don't deserve credit for where they are, because they've been so good, but it's that it's very easy to become complacent when you find yourself at second in the conference right now, as they have been. And we even just admitted, Mike, yeah, the Suns are second in the NBA. They're second in the conference right now. But if the Lakers were at full strength, if the Clippers have missed a lot of games of Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, the Nuggets are climbing back up the standings. Portland has been winning games without CJ McCollum and Yusuf Nurkic. A lot of things have already broken right for the Suns. They maybe don't deserve to be exactly where they are. If I would trade Ayton for Vucevic. Now, I will say, I think it's a moot point. I think it's kind of a fruitless, useless discussion, because there isn't really a way that I've been able to discover for the Suns to actually make that trade in the first place. So I don't think, Vucevic specifically isn't the type of guy I'm talking about, but he's the type of hypothetical talent level.
He's an all-star.
He's an all-star, and that's what it is.
Right.
DeAndre Ayton, we're talking about potential. Nikola Vucevic is a current all-star in his prime. There's an obvious difference there to anyone who seriously watches the two players. And what I'm saying right now is, as important as potential is, for guys like DeAndre Ayton, for guys like Mikal Bridges, who I love so much, if you really believe that the Suns can win this year, then none of that other stuff matters. You go and get the best players you can right now. And it's true for Jalen Smith as well. And talking about George Hill, I wouldn't immediately offer Jalen Smith for George Hill. I wouldn't want to overplay my hand if I was James Jones, right? And, not to mention, I like Jalen Smith. I actually think he's going to be something in the NBA one day. I think there's a very good chance that he's going to be a serviceable rotational big. And I think the reason he hasn't played mostly for the Suns so far is just because, he's a young kid, and Dario Saric has just been so good. But that doesn't mean I wouldn't be willing to make those types of moves if I really think the Suns can win a championship this year. It's just we've been bad for so long that we've kind of forgotten when the right time is to shift into that gear and accelerate the timeline. There's your plug for the name of this podcast in the first place, to accelerate the timeline and actually accomplish the ultimate goal. We're all trying to win a championship. That's why we watch this team, right? So I'm not worried about potential right now. I'm not worried about the future and what these players are going to be in 2 or 3 years. If you really think they can take down the Lakers, put your money where your mouth is and try.
Yeah, I mean, just for the record, Ayton, Jalen Smith, Javon Carter, and say Galloway and Nader, that would make up what Vucevic makes in salary. If you're talking about what it would take to get an all-star at this point, that's
a lot.
It's a lot, and the Suns would have to fill. And it's exactly why that conversation is interesting. For one, if you trade Ayton, you're really looking at a massive hole in this team as far as defensive, and we're going to talk more about Ayton later, because I think he's such a fascinating part of the questions that face the team later in the season. And obviously his offense has been a bit of a roller coaster this season. There was a stretch where he was possibly the best offensive player on the team for a few games, 4 games in a row. And then outside of that, it's been a roller coaster. And, you're looking at a massive hole there. And if you absolutely strike all your depth, and then now you have to backfill the roster with minimum guys that are available at this point of the season, hopefully guys that are bought out or something like that, it just gets really complicated and at the very least interesting. That's what it would take to add another all-star to this team. Do they need that? I'm not convinced that they do. But, I'm not. It's a weird thing where I could see the value of doing it, and I could see the reasoning against it. It's something that I'm not really willing to just fall on either side of that. And I guess that's a little bit wishy-washy with that conversation. But I just, for me, it's more about reading what I think James Jones would do. And it's very hard to read.
I think he could do anything. Look, I think if we're talking about realism, I think it's going to be a pretty boring trade deadline for the Suns.
Yeah,
I agree. They are going to explore the buyout market. They might explore, there's a reason they created one open roster spot in the first place. They'll explore a minor trade, and I think there's room for us in the conversation later when we talk about the bench to also talk about trade targets. I have a list of a few trade targets here that I think are interesting for a bench spot. So again, I don't think we're trading for Cat this year. I don't think we're trading for Vucevic this year. Right. Philosophically, though, I'd be open to the idea, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, I think I feel that way too, but I'm just kind of open to a lot of ideas when it comes to team building. Whereas I think a lot of fans are not, at least during the regular season. a lot of things shift. I mean, we saw it with
demonstrated
with
by the
Chris
fact,
Paul.
by the way, that we're just retreading old battles right now. Demonstrated by the fact that a lot of fans didn't want to give up Ricky Rubio and Kelly Oubre for Chris Paul,
exactly.
which is fine. You get attached to guys. It's part of being a fan, but it's sort of the same conversation all over again, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So should they make a trade? Probably. I mean, you should absolutely see what's out there. Should they make a massive trade? I don't think they will, and I think that there's a fair argument to make that they should probably see what this team can do in the playoffs based on how they're currently playing. With DeAndre Ayton, I know we're going to get to him. Part of the issue with DeAndre Ayton is his focus from a game to game, just sort of how he sort of drifts in and out sometimes. When you're in the playoffs and every game is sort of vitally important to win, it's possible that he clicks on for every playoff game and you get the DeAndre Ayton that you need in every playoff game. If that does happen, it's that's kind of what you need. So
that's how he earns that second contract.
Yeah, it really would be. It really would be. So, and that's when you need him the most. And we talked about it with Mikal Bridges as well. Like I said on the last episode, if Mikal Bridges averages 18 points in the playoffs, all of a sudden he's getting $25 million a year. So it's, I have a feeling that they're going to hold pat. Buyout guys, I don't think George Hill is going to get bought out for anybody who is talking. He has some guaranteed salary next year. It would take a lot to buy him out. I think that OKC has the right kind of leverage that they're probably going to try and trade him. And I think Houston's going to do their best to try and trade PJ Tucker too. But I do think there's a chance he gets bought out just with the fact that his agent is so... They're not really happy with Houston, PJ Tucker and his agent. So
they have no reason to be. That being said, PJ's been bad this year, but I think it's the same situation as Blake where... And you disagree with me on this, I think. But I think it's the same situation as Blake where neither guy is there to be a starter necessarily and save your whole system. But I think there's a little bit of juice to squeeze out of both guys. And by the way, Aaron Baines, too. I just want to throw his name out there again.
Right.
I mentioned him on the pod with Max when it was just Max and I a couple weeks ago. And I mean, I'd still be watching his name because I'd happily pick him up again if he hits the market.
My feelings on Blake, just to clarify, were that if he were to sign, I think that he would have wanted a bigger role than I think the Suns should have given him based on how he's played so far. He's just
this
been
is
really
a
bad.
war
with PJ Tucker. I just don't feel like he would demand that. I think PJ Tucker is the type of guy that is willing to earn that role, whereas Blake maybe wants it a little bit. But we'll see. I do think he'll be good on the Nets. Like I think he still has some juice left. I do wonder how much minutes he's going to get in the playoffs. I don't know that he has
I am
legs
glad
for
to
it.
hear you at least say that you think because when we had our little timeline civil war on Twitter the other day about Blake Griffin of all things, ridiculous. I think the most compelling argument I heard from you still was the chemistry, the off-court chemistry stuff. Because really, I think Blake's going to be fine, surrounded by the right talent.
I just don't think he's going to play in the playoffs, really. And I think like a guy like PJ Tucker, who's objectively a worse player than Blake Griffin, is a guy who probably can still get minutes in the playoffs. And Blake just can't because of defense. You have to be a good team defender in the playoffs to get minutes on a good team. And I even think for the Nets, they're the type of thing where they don't have any good defensive players. So maybe he will get minutes on that team. Whereas on the Suns, I'm not sure he would. It's a weird thing where I would say I would not play him over Dario Saric. That's where Blake Griffin's career is at.
I'm assuming you feel the same way about Drummond then? Like Drummond.
Yeah, I was going to ask about him.
Well, because here's the thing, man. Drummond is so talented. And this is kind of what frustrated me a little bit about Blake is if I were Blake, even if the Suns were interested, I would run to Brooklyn too. But there's something that doesn't sit quite right with me about Blake going to Brooklyn. Andre Drummond, if the reports are true, being potentially interested in going to LA. I saw something from
Lakers.
From Shams about that today. Yeah, to the Lakers. Sorry, I sometimes forget. I have to specify which LA.
Yeah.
It's an arms race, and so there's something shitty about the Suns kind of sitting out and saying hubristically, no, we're fine with what we have. We think we have enough talent to win here. When I'm as high on the Suns as anyone, I think, but I just don't believe that. They need more talent to get around some of these best teams at full health. That being said, Drummond, the fit is just weird. I mean, Sarge has been so good off the bench. I think the Suns absolutely could benefit from another physical big to serve as DeAndre Ayton insurance in case Ayton is not bringing the hustle, the energy, in case he's not physically setting the tone, as our old friend Baines Fan Club would say. That's why I'm interested in Aaron Baines. But I just don't know if Drummond is that guy specifically, because Drummond would take minutes away from Sarge at the 5, where Sarge has been most productive.
Yeah, it's a different thing with Drummond, where I felt like Blake would have never agreed to come to the Suns because I think they would have been upfront with what his role would be. If Drummond were to agree to come to the Suns, he would essentially have to agree to be the third center. And I'm not sure he would agree to that either. The Lakers would probably tell him, hey, we could start you like right now. Like you could start on this team. And, why wouldn't he take that? Start on a contender. And maybe he plays 13 minutes, 14 minutes a game on a contender, but he's still starting, and that might matter.
It just sucks because it feels like he's not a good fit here, but it also feels like he makes that LA team, the Lakers, feels like he makes them better.
Yeah.
Because he's good.
His finishing at the rim is really bad, though. I found that
kind of fascinating. But I don't care.
Yeah,
I really don't want to hear it. Like,
I get it.
And it's nothing against you. But it's like Andre Drummond is the type of guy, you pay a player $30 million and so much of the narrative changes to where people have been picking little holes in Andre Drummond's game for years. But
just
it's like
the rebounding alone.
You get the chance to get the best rebounder in the NBA for $2 million.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, you just got to shift your expectations a little bit.
I totally agree.
Finisher.
I totally agree. I think for me, it's just, I don't think he would come here. So it's difficult to even talk about that. Like, if DeAndre Ayton was injured or something and you can slot him into the starting lineup, then yeah, I think he would. But it's just not, I don't even know that it's worth even talking about it. And you're right. At $2 million, he's a great fit on any team. Okay. 2 questions. We've gotten 2 questions so far. We got a few more. This is an interesting one. Who is the best playoff matchup for the Suns when you're looking at the playoff picture right now? Now, it's actually, I was telling you before we started recording this, where I still am a Suns fan ultimately, where even just talking about making the playoffs makes me almost uncomfortable and scared. Right now, the Suns would play the Spurs in the first round. I don't think they've played the Spurs yet this season, right?
They haven't.
Yeah, so it's difficult to say if that would even be a good or a bad matchup. I mean,
I think that's ideal, though.
Yeah.
I will say that's my pick.
Keep in mind that it would be a competition between the Spurs, Mavericks, Warriors, and Grizzlies right now. If they were, with that sort of 7, 8, 9, 10 competing for those last 2 playoff spots. So it could be one of any of those 4 teams based on where the records are right now. You'd rather play the Spurs than the Mavericks? We'll start there.
Yeah.
Yeah? Why?
Yeah, playoffs come... Yeah, I realize I'm on a podcast. I have to tell you why.
I mean, DeAndre Ayton just kills the Mavericks, too. It's not
DeAndre does kill the Mavericks.
Ayton, but yeah,
well,
the game he plays.
It absolutely helps that we have destroyed the Mavericks for the past few years.
And
for
Booker,
whatever reason.
Really, yeah.
Even with Igor, the season we were awful, we still beat the Mavericks. The Spurs don't have star power. That's all due respect to DeMar DeRozan, who's had a great season, but playoffs is about star power.
Yeah.
And I don't care if Popovich can work all the weird voodoo magic he wants. I don't think he's getting out of the first round with that crew. So I think really San Antonio would be the ideal matchup. We would have to eat our words quite a bit if they managed to beat us. I guess it would be shades of them getting us back for 2010 all over again.
Right.
But I do think just lack of star power for that team. They share the ball well. They take care of the ball. But they're also like not loaded with shooters. There's nothing in particular that you can point out about that San Antonio roster and say, yeah, they're elite at that. Like, I don't think they're elite at a single thing. So I just feel pretty confident about taking care of business against a team like that.
Yeah. Looking at the 4 teams that are there, 7, 8, 9, 10, I mean, the worst team is the Grizzlies. That would probably be the team that I would choose if we could play against any of those, just because they're the worst team, struggled to stay healthy. Young, where, that's the type of team that Chris Paul will kind of tear apart. When it's a young team, the Warriors probably scare me the most out of that group, just because they have the star power, exactly what you're talking about, where they have a guy who could just average 50 for 4 games in a row if they need him to. If the Pelicans or even the Thunder or the Kings could get up into that mix. Obviously, I'd prefer any one of those teams, and it could be them, right? If they get up to the 10th seed, they just have to win one game against the 7, 8, or 9 to be in the playoffs. If the Suns are still at the top of the charts here, then there's a chance that you could play any one of those. So, I'd prefer probably the Kings out of any of those teams if we could play the Kings, because they're the worst at 14 and 22. But all of these teams, the Suns are good enough now where I feel pretty confident against most of them, except for maybe the Warriors. And even the Warriors, I feel pretty confident.
That's interesting that you just broke up what was going to be my point there by saying you feel pretty confident, because I sense, hesitation. I sense fear in your voice. And I was kind of thinking
that's the Suns fan in me. It's still here.
That's right. I understand that it's
especially
there,
the Spurs.
It's like if we're worried about the San Antonio Spurs, then maybe we're not as close to being, maybe the answer to the original question, are the Suns contenders, is no. Maybe we're not contenders if we're worried about
it's like
the Spurs.
Someone who's afraid of clowns as an adult because a clown scared them when they're a kid. Clowns are not actually dangerous to most people, but there's something in there that still scarred me, that has me still afraid of the Spurs a little bit.
Sure.
It just exists. It's tough to get rid of that. Same with the Lakers to an extent, but it's more, I feel like, with the Spurs because Pop is sort of outmaneuvered coaches that the Suns have had in the past, and we're going to get to Monty later and talk about that. But who's the worst playoff matchup, do you think? We don't have to spend too long. I think it's got to be the Lakers, right? At some point, if the Suns get
at some point. If you were talking about just first round, it was when they were matched up a few days ago against Denver. That scared me. Denver's just a really good team, and there's also the fact that Jamal Murray hasn't taken it up a notch like he did in the playoffs last year. He hasn't done that yet this year. So if he does that again, in addition to what Jokic is doing, that's really tough. That team is really tough.
That's tough.
Obviously the Lakers are the worst of all matchups, though, of any team you could play in the Western Conference Finals. But once this team gets into the second round, they're all pretty difficult. Even if Golden State snuck into the second round, even if Portland snuck into the second round, those teams, I think the advantage is what separates the Suns from those teams is that the Suns have better perimeter defenders. We have a Mikal Bridges to sick on their 30-point per game scores. They don't necessarily get the same privilege on us, but they're still loaded with star power. Like a Portland with a healthy CJ and Nurkic is not to be taken for granted. They've gotten to the Western Conference Finals before with that core. So
CJ was
even
basically
those teams,
Devin Booker before he went down to one of the better scorers in the NBA.
Right.
Just to spite you and I think. Is nobody afraid of the Jazz, by the way?
Well,
isn't that kind of funny?
Is nobody afraid of the Jazz? I think some people are
in
afraid
the
of
second
the Jazz.
round. Would anybody be I almost would prefer the Jazz over a lot of the second round teams that I could look at, but the Suns have to play them a few more times, so we're going to get some more looks at them. But the Suns match up well against them.
The main critique that I had of the Suns very early on in this episode, right, when I was talking about the Suns have benefited from a clean slate of health for the most part. The measure, again, I'm plugging my article, which should be up today on Brightside. The measure that I used for that is looking at the unique number of starting lineups that each team has used. Because logically, you've used fewer unique combinations of these 5 guys as starting means you've been healthier. Because ideally, you settle on your 5 guys and those are your guys. Consistently, what we see is the teams that use fewer starting lineup combinations have better net ratings in the NBA. And in fact, that's true this year, where the 3 top teams in net rating as of today, Phoenix, Utah, and Milwaukee, are the 3 teams that have used the fewest lineup combinations. So a lot of that, that same criticism that I said about Phoenix, we've been luckier than we deserve to this point, knock on wood. You could say the same thing about Utah. They've just stuck with their 5 guys all season long. I think they've used literally 3 lineups this entire season. Meanwhile, you've got teams out here like the Clippers and Lakers who are on number 18 or 20 of the starting lineups. Literally, that's how many starting lineups those teams have used at this point. They've had to suffer a lot more adversity than the Utah Jazz. So as impressive as it is that Utah is where they are in the standings, they have a 2-game lead over us and maybe 3 or 4 over the LA teams. All you need to do is hope for a sprained ankle to one of those players, honestly. And it's going to be a level of adversity that they just haven't faced yet this season. Yeah. So I'm curious to see if something like that happens.
And I don't think it's a coincidence that they started off so well, and they were the team that had one of the highest levels of continuity from previous years.
Yeah.
And then as teams get to play with each other a little bit more and their continuity develops and sort of that chemistry develops, they can catch up a little bit to the Jazz. We'll see how well they do. They're very good, and all of the stats point to them being legit, and it's just tough for me to see it because I haven't watched enough of them to really come to that conclusion. Some mornings you wake up feeling ready to pull the covers over your head and go back to sleep. No judgment, of course, but let's make having the most comfortable sheets the reason why. Don't love your sheets? Brooklinen has you covered. So Brooklinen was started by Rich and Vicky, who also tried to find beautiful home essentials that didn't cost an arm and a leg. And when they couldn't, they founded Brooklinen as the first direct-to-consumer bedding company. They work directly with manufacturers to make luxury available directly to you without the luxury level markups. Brooklinen has a variety of sheets, colors, patterns, and materials to fit your needs and tastes. Brooklinen has over 50,000 five-star reviews and counting. They're so confident that you will love their products, they even offer a 365-day money-back guarantee. And Brooklinen is so much more than sheets. They've got comforters, pillows, towels, even loungewear, and more. If you're even considering buying sheets, why not buy from this great company and support this podcast? Go to brooklinen.com and use the promo code TIMELINE to get $25 off when you spend $100 or more, plus free shipping. That's BROOKLINEN.com and enter the promo code TIMELINE to get $25 off when you spend $100 or more, plus free shipping. brooklinen.com and use the promo code TIMELINE at checkout. Let's see, this one. What has disappointed you the most this season, and who or what has disappointed you the most this season, and who or what has impressed you the most this season?
Do you want to start?
Yeah, I could start. Let me start with the good. Let me start with the good thing. Let me start with the good thing.
Okay, great.
There's two things that have impressed me the most. Chris Paul, and I knew that watching Chris Paul on a game-to-game basis was going to be a blast, but I mean, he's just a genius, and it's very fun to watch him on a game-to-game basis. And the other thing is the Suns' defense. I talked myself into the Suns having a top 10 defense right before the season started, and it almost scared me because I realized they could have a top 10 defense and a top 10 offense. Is that real, or am I insane? And so far, they have been even better than I had anticipated, up near the top of the league in defense, and I think those are the things that have impressed me the most. And
it's all thanks to Dario Saric. So congratulations to him.
Yeah.
It's literally true though. Dario Saric has the best defensive rating of any rotation player in the NBA right now. I just want to put that out there. That is a true fact. Mm-hmm. No one expected that we would be there. That we would be here today.
No, absolutely not.
Saying that.
And here's the disappointing part. I think is a difficult thing to talk about on a podcast with a team that's playing so well. But there's two things for this too. And the first one I think is almost unfair to say, but Jalen Smith so far has the whole Jalen Smith experience has been relatively disappointing with how good other players have played, specifically one in Tyrese Halliburton. And the fact that he struggled to stay on the court with the Suns, which is fair for a contender. Rookies usually don't play, and in his stint in the G League hasn't been ultra impressive. So that's been disappointing, and it's tough to say this, but I got to say it. DeAndre Ayton's offense specifically has been incredibly disappointing so far this season. I mean, and we'll talk more about DeAndre Ayton, so I'll just hold off there. But what do you think?
I'll hold off with you then, because that was what I was going to talk about too.
So it's as far as being disappointed. What's impressed you the most, and then let's get to Ayton.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Paul, first of all, very impressive, like you said. I just think about what the discourse was about Chris Paul, right, before the season started. It's pretty rare in the social media age that a guy with a $40 million contract comes in like Chris Paul and just completely assuage the fears of the entire Suns fan base. That doesn't happen that often like he's done. And I think there's still a question about, is he going to run out of gas at some point? That's valid. But I've pointed out in the past, statistically, the season he's having right now is very similar to the season Nash had in 2010 when the Suns last went to the Western Conference Finals. That's how good he's been. And Mikal Bridges probably deserves a shout out here too. Took a step forward. I don't think, we have to get into that in great detail right now because I think we've talked about it. But Mikal Bridges taking a step forward in his offensive game, working to expand it, getting to the point where he now punishes mismatches and stuff and looks to find his own mid-range shot, not super frequently, but frequently enough that it's an option, is important. It really builds out the versatility and how dynamic this offense is.
Yeah, those are good ones, and we'll get to DeAndre Ayton. Let's specifically.
And can I just say, DeAndre Ayton hasn't been bad.
No,
but he has disappointed. Do you want to just get into it now?
Yes. The question we have on DeAndre Ayton is, what should we make of DeAndre Ayton's season?
Sure,
but I think the question is so overarching. I just listened to Eddie Johnson on the Zach Lowe podcast, and both of them talked about how important DeAndre Ayton is for the Suns this season. Devin Booker's talked about how important DeAndre Ayton is for the Suns this season. Chris Paul has talked about it. James Jones has talked about it. Monty Williams has talked about it. Basically, everyone is capable of recognizing the importance of DeAndre Ayton this season. And I'll be honest, that kind of scares me sometimes because of his inconsistency. There was a 4-game stretch where DeAndre Ayton showed you and showed all of us how good he can be when he is properly aggressive, and then that sort of disappeared offensively. Now, I think it's very important to say, one of the things that has impressed me the most this season has been the Suns' defense, and the Suns' defense is still headed by DeAndre Ayton, who plays the most minutes at the center position for this team, and he's a young player playing center on one of the best defensive teams in the NBA. That is important, and it's very, very impressive, and that's part of who he is. You can say all that if you ignore the on-off numbers, and it looks especially good. Now, the on-off numbers for him on defense are not good, and
they're not good. It's an important distinction to make there, that the flip side of saying Dario Saric has the best defensive rating in the NBA means that, or that he has the best defensive rating on the Suns, rather, means that DeAndre Ayton, among everyone in the Suns rotation, has the worst defensive rating in the rotation.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying there's a reason for that. I'm not even saying there's a particular reason that I've sussed out why that's the case.
I almost find it inexplicable at this point.
I think it's the great mystery of the Suns season, is how DeAndre Ayton can look so sound defensively most of the time. I don't think he's an elite defender. I think some Suns fans, there's a legion of Suns fans who have rushed to crown DeAndre Ayton as an elite defender. I don't think he's there yet. I think he's good. Definitely better than his defensive rating suggests. And so that's kind of the big mystery of the season, is why that massive gulf between those two players even exists in the first place.
What is tough about DeAndre Ayton for me so far this season, and this is just full honesty here, and I've talked to you about this, Sam, before, is what it takes for DeAndre Ayton to have a good game and have a good season. The expectations for him have lowered so much that basically all he has to do is be good to not bad defensively and not screw up offensively, and then all of a sudden he's done well. Well, a lot of us expected a little bit more out of him this season. What I wanted to see him do is develop more as a playmaker. He hasn't done that. I wanted to see him develop more as somebody who's capable of dribbling the ball. He has not done that. I wanted to see him develop more as a shooter. He has not done that. So now what we're saying is, for him to be good, he just has to not screw up on offense, and he has to be relatively good on defense. And if you can't call that disappointing, I'm not sure what you can say. Because that is disappointing, that we are lowered our expectations so much that for him to be good, he just has to not be bad. I think better if he was good at shooting, or if he was good at playmaking at this, or good at dribbling. I would like that more. But we've just sort of given up on that, haven't we?
Yeah, I think you said it all. I mean, the truth is, there's a lot of crazy people on both ends of the spectrum with the DeAndre Ayton conversation. Some people would have you believe he's the next Tim Duncan. Some people would have you believe he doesn't belong in the NBA at all. And those are always kind of conversations, it seems like, invariably about his potential. But just right now, what DeAndre Ayton is right now, he's an average starting center in the NBA. And I don't think he's really anything more or anything less than that. He's solid. He gives you a lot of good games, and he also gives you a lot of bad games. And one thing I do want to credit him for, it was important that he entered into Monty's system this year and was willing to take the step back on offense to become more of a role player that he did. That was a big change for him to make. He hasn't entirely cut out the face-up mid-range game out of his offense, but I didn't want him to. I just wanted him to trim off the excess and kind of turn it into, maybe he was taking 3 or 4 of those shots per game, turn that into 1 or 2 and take the extra possessions and use those as roll man possessions instead, and try to get to the rim and try to be a lob threat next to Chris Paul. For the most part, DeAndre Ayton has responded very well to that, and it's resulted in him having the highest true shooting percentage of his career. His efficiency has gone up. He's playing like more of a role player. But to your point, Mike, there's more to being a good role player as a center in the NBA than just grabbing 10 rebounds and being a lob threat. A lot of guys can grab 10 rebounds and be a lob threat. And again, that's not saying DeAndre Ayton's bad. It's just saying, it's just facts. A lot of guys can grab 10 rebounds and be a lob threat. For him to take the next step into being a great role player, one of those, as I've called them before, superstar role players, guys who are a superstar in their role, even if they're not necessarily 20 or 25 point per game scorers. He has to take the next step with the shooting so that he actually has spacing and gravity on the floor. He has to take the next step with his playmaking. And most importantly, he has to bring the effort every night on defense, because as we know, it's all about defense with DeAndre Ayton. And if he doesn't bring that effort and consistency every night, then kind of the entire scheme falls apart. So yeah, I just don't know how many ways I can say it. It's not that DeAndre Ayton has been bad. It's just that how many times can you actually point at him in a game this season and say, yeah, he's stood out in a positive way?
4 times.
I don't know that. It hasn't been often.
4 times. It was 4 excellent games, and that was the standard that he set for himself that we now have to hold him to, because he's proven that he can do that. And it's fair to say maybe it is all mental. And I still believe there's a chance that it sort of clicks and locks in the playoffs when he understands the importance of the games. Maybe that is possible. But for the Suns to be good, he just has to play defense and catch lobs at the rim and do his best to score when he's under the basket. And why is that the case? Well, it's because he's not very good at those other things. Right? That's really the truth of it. And that's the important thing that I think we have to face at some point. If he was good at dribbling, then for the Suns to be good, he would dribble. That would be good. If he was good at shooting, then for the Suns to be good, he would shoot. Like, the reason that we have limited his role so much at this point of his career, and why he's just a role player that does a very small amount of things offensively, is because he struggled to do those other things. And that means that it's been disappointing so far. And that's tough. And we've sort of stayed away from this conversation, I think, so far, because of how it's become such a hot button issue for Suns fans this season. But at some point we have to recognize that we're expecting less and less and less from him, and that's not great. That's just a little bit tough. It's disappointing at the very least. The Suns can still be very, very good with DeAndre Ayton on the team, and I think that's the good news. But so much of that is because of Chris Paul and how good Chris Paul is. And Chris Paul is old, at some point. And hopefully DeAndre Ayton will develop more and more in the future. But it's not been exciting as far as the development curve for DeAndre Ayton this season.
Chris Paul is old, and not to throw another shot at Jalen Smith, but Tyrese Halliburton is not on this team. There's not an obvious heir to Chris Paul yet either, which doesn't help matters.
Yeah, it just makes it more complicated. So I'm not fully convinced that DeAndre Ayton's defense is non-exploitable in the playoffs as well. I think we saw what the Nets did. Obviously, that's an extreme, but that's the types of teams that you play when you're in the playoffs. You play the guys with the ultra-talented perimeter players. And, if you just look at the numbers alone, it looks like it is exploitable. And that's something that the Suns have to figure out. And as they play better and better teams going forward this season, there's a nice stretch in April where we're going to get a good look at how teams are going to play us in the playoffs. We're going to see if he's capable of doing that. And I'm not saying that he can't. I think there's a good chance that what he can provide with a big that can switch onto the perimeter could be the most important thing for the Suns in the playoffs. But we have to see it still.
Last thing on this before we move on, because we have a lot of other questions to address. Saric has been so good, and we are halfway through the season now where the net ratings say what the net ratings say. Whatever reason that's for, we don't exactly know. But I think someone asked this question when you tweeted about it, like, should Dario be taking more of Ayton's minutes? Is that something that we're going to see in the playoffs as Monty's response to these challenges that some of these lineups are facing? Not necessarily that Dario would start. I don't really think he would start, But maybe instead of it being currently a situation where DeAndre plays like 30 minutes and Dario plays 18, you kind of level them out where it's closer to 50-50, 24-24. What do you think?
I think that what we know about Monty, we're going to talk more about him, is that he's probably going to first try to play them together to try and get Dario on the court a little bit more. And if that works, then you can continue doing that. It's not a terrible experiment, in my opinion, just because at some point the Suns might play the Lakers and you have to see if there's two big lineups that work. But if it doesn't work, then yeah, I think there's a chance. And at some point, it's just those two guys earning their minutes. Whoever earns them, and they're going to play a little bit more. So, it's entirely on the players as far as what they can do. So we'll see. All right, fascinating there. Sorry if you pissed off some people there, but you got to have that conversation at some point. Next question: is Devin Booker back to normal? Now,
DeAndre Ayton sucks. Next question: is Devin Booker amazing?
Well, here's the thing. What Devin Booker does is vital for this team going forward. We all have had these beliefs and thoughts about how good Devin Booker is. Well, now they are going to be tested. He struggled to start this season. It's inarguable that he struggled to start this season. What he can do and the ceiling that he can reach for this team is the most important thing, because we know that Chris Paul is likely going to be a very consistent player. The only worry with Chris Paul, really, for me, is whether or not he can stay healthy going forward. There's no analysis there, so I'm not even going to talk about that. There's no point. Assuming he can, the heights that Devin Booker reaches is likely going to be the heights that this team reaches, because if he struggles offensively in the playoffs, the Suns are probably done for. Like, you don't have a lot of other guys that can step up in that role. It's really just Devin Booker. He started looking really good. I mean, he had his season high right before the season ended. Everyone thought he was going to be motivated by not initially getting selected for the All-Star game, and I'd say that they were right, especially with Chris Paul feeding him the way he was. He's starting to look a little bit back to normal. I'm pretty confident that he's going to look pretty good. He obviously has a knee injury now. I think it's just a knee-to-knee thing where it's just probably swollen and sore, and he's probably going to be fine in a week or two. But how do you feel about how he was playing before the break?
Well, how he was playing before the break, he was fantastic before the break. In terms of trying to project it forward, I feel good. I feel good about Book basically being back to his old self. I'm not sure that it's obvious, because Booker is, what is he, 24? 20? He's not 25 yet, right?
I don't think so.
He's 20. I think he's 24
Doesn't he have
years
your
old.
birthday? I feel like you should know.
That's a good point. So I am 23, therefore Booker is 24. He's exactly 1 year older than me. That's a good point. Ideally, a guy who's 24 years old isn't in his prime yet. So I'm still waiting to see kind of where else he can take it to, because I do think Booker is to the point now with what his play was in the last few weeks before the break. He's where he was at last season. He's that good. Can he get even better? That's kind of what I'm waiting to see.
Yeah. I have a stat for you. Since February 1st, I'd say when the Suns clicked, that's probably a good time to sort of center it at. Devin Booker is shooting 36% from pull-up threes. That we talked about.
That's a stat that I like.
And you know what? That's better than Damian Lillard is shooting on pull-up threes for the season. Obviously, Damian Lillard shoots like 9 a game, so it's a different stat. But just raw percentage-wise, Damian Lillard is shooting like 35%, and that's 36%. Yeah. So
that stat pleases me very much, because that's like the thing that the Suns need. And Booker historically has been around, like, he's finished seasons maybe around 29% there sometimes, some years. I think he was closer to 32, 33 last year. But if he can get up to 36 plus, he's a different animal offensively. I mean, I think I said it literally on our last episode, so I don't feel the need to elaborate again. But, like, yeah, he's unstoppable if he has that to his bag too.
Yeah, and I think it's a very specific... He's not shooting them behind screens currently. There are some screen scenarios where he takes a dribble and shoots a three, but I think a lot of it is, instead of attacking closeouts from the mid-range, he's now taking little side... It's kind of Jason Tatum style sidestep dribbles and shooting them off the three. And I think that's actually pretty smart, because that's sort of expanding that mid-range game out to a little further out, and that's seems to be how he feels comfortable shooting off the dribble. So if he finds ways to incorporate something that makes him comfortable shooting off the dribble at the 3-point line, that's the best possible scenario. He's shooting very well from the 3-point line. I think that's the vital thing for him. And maybe there's a question later that we can talk about with that. But I'd say he looks pretty good. He's probably about back to normal, and it's just about sustained play at this point and consistency. Same with DeAndre Ayton, as we talked about a little bit before that. All right, anything else for that one?
No, I think we can move on. That was quick and easy. Hopefully got people back into it after they went and left us a 1-star review for the previous topic.
That's what it takes sometimes. Is what the Suns bench is doing sustainable? I mean, you talked about it with Dario Saric specifically. He's actually missed some games too. Although he comes in and the Suns start winning, that just seems to be something that happens. But even without him, there were times where the Suns bench is sort of carrying the team. The starting lineup has been moved around a few times. It's really weird and interesting to see how that works. But is what they're doing sustainable? My first thought, and I'll just say it before I let you go here, is I don't think it is. I think it's been unsustainably good so far. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, again, like Dario has the best net rating of anyone in the NBA.
Yeah.
I don't think it's sustainable. And that's not to say that he can't be very good. As an aside, I was happy to see KOC in his Power Rankings article today. He mentioned Dario Saric for Sixth Man of the Year as the first member, of course, who else would it be? The first member of the national media to kind of hint at that notion. And look, all things said and done, I still think Jordan Clarkson wraps that up for Utah just because he plays like 30 minutes a game and Dario plays like 18. I think minutes played.
Games too.
Yeah, you need to get people to vote for you for that award. You need to A, play a lot of games, Dario's missed games, and B, play like 25, 30 minutes. You need to be like a sixth starter, and Monty hasn't used him like that to this point. But I think the lineups will continue to be a positive for the rest of the season. They won't be a plus 20, but they'll be a positive, and that's really all you can ask for out of your bench. If your bench is consistently leaving you in a better position than when your starters left the game, obviously you take that. Now, are there tweaks that you can make to this bench? Absolutely. I think Cam Johnson has been good. I think Cam Payne, for the most part, has been good. Etuan Moore, it's kind of confusing to me why Etuan Moore is still playing like 15 minutes per game. Yeah. I mean, he's fine. The thing about Etuan is I don't want to throw him under the bus because I still don't think the Suns are using him properly. I still think they're using him primarily as kind of like a point guard, and he's not even shooting close to nearly as many three-pointers as he did in New Orleans. So like there's an element of why don't you run this guy off some screens, really try to open him up, and I think he would play a lot better. But if they're not going to do that, the Suns could easily go out there and try and find a different combo guard off the bench who would be better than Etuan Moore, better than Langston Galloway, better than Javon Carter. I don't think it would be that hard for them to find that at the deadline. So to go back to our original conversation from the very beginning of the episode about should the Suns make a trade, if you're just looking for minor fixer-uppers, that's a very easy route to take and probably a smart one too.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about George Hill. I think that's probably he's got championship level experience for over 4,000 playoff minutes played. I looked that up. A lot of minutes.
He's the obvious guy. One team that I thought was interesting, I was looking at. I have a hard time believing that they would really be sellers at the deadline given the age of a lot of the guys in their core. But I was looking at Indiana, and I think they're kind of interesting because they're 10th in the East. Right now, they're a team that suffered some health setbacks. That team has some interesting options. Like TJ McConnell is a free agent at the end of the year. He's 28 years old. He's only making $3.5 million. You could easily swap Javon Carter in a pick or something. And if the Pacers were interested in it, if they punt on basically being a legitimate playoff team after they drop a few more games between now and the deadline, then there's a guy who's averaging 2 steals per game. He's giving you great defense and playmaking. You could go get a guy like that off the bench. They also have Jeremy Lamb on the same roster. He's a guy I raved about, I remember, to you a couple years ago when he hit free agency and chose the Pacers instead. He's exactly what you need out of a combo guard, just like kind of a slasher who can also hit the three, who just gives you points off the bench and can play that shooting guard position really well. So I think that's an interesting roster. You can maybe explore something with them. I don't know that there are any other obvious
DeLon
targets.
Wright is a name I've seen floated around.
DeLon Wright is definitely interesting. He's having a solid season for Detroit, but Detroit is terrible. The thing that I don't understand about Detroit is they're 10-26. They should tank. I mean, they should be tanking, but like they're kind of doing this thing, I guess, like the Suns did a couple years ago, where they're pretending to have veterans and be okay. And I don't know what it's going to take for them to sell those guys off. I think realistically, you could definitely get DeLon Wright. You could probably get like Derrick Rose from them pretty easily if you wanted him. I don't want him. But yeah, those are interesting choices. Devontae Graham for Charlotte.
That's
too,
a fascinating one.
Is a really fascinating one because he's injured right now, but it's pretty clear that when he comes back, it's gonna be LaMelo starting in a spot from now on. And he's a really interesting player, man, because he's just won most improved player. Yeah, he's good. I mean, he's pretty bad defensively. I'll just say that, but offensively, he's a really fascinating piece. Struggled this season if you look at his stats, so it's fair if you look at that. He shoots literally like 35% from the field, and the reason that is because Devontae Graham is, in addition to struggling defensively, one of the worst finishers in the NBA.
Yeah,
one of the worst finishers we've seen in like rookie Ricky Rubio levels. If you remember what rookie Ricky Rubio was like when he shot like 35% from the field, Devontae Graham is that bad. But he hits pull-up threes and he hits step-back threes, and that's exactly what I want the Suns to have on their offense. Is Devontae Graham is a volume shooter who goes out there and just chucks like 10 threes a game, and he hits like 36% of them, and you're like, cool, that's great. You
and
just
he's
spaced
got
out
ball
our
handling
offense.
skills.
And he's got ball handling skills, and he can leverage his shooting gravity and find the open passing lane, find the right guy. So he's really interesting. I don't know if he's actually available, but just throwing a few names out there, these are the types of guys you might be interested in if you're the Suns, because they're obvious upgrades over what you currently have at either backup guard spot.
Yeah, and it's something that you'll hear me continually talk about for the rest of the season is, can the players that the Suns are getting, can they play minutes in the playoffs as far as defensively? That's why George Hill easily stands out. That's why PJ Tucker stands out. Devontae Graham cannot. If you're getting Devontae Graham, you're getting him for a depth piece during the regular season. It's not a playoff thing, and you're hoping that he can develop into something in the future. Those guys are still fine. You can get those guys. They're able to be gotten relatively cheap at times during the season, and you still have to develop for the future at some point. It's a delicate balance, but there's a difference between getting guys who can play now and getting guys that you want to develop for the future. And
I agree with you. I agree with you to an extent, but also like the bar isn't that high right now. Like I don't think Etuan Moore is that good of a defender either. If like Cameron Payne, I think is held up pretty well defensively. If you're going to play Devontae Graham at shooting guard instead of Etuan Moore, though, I think you take that trade off.
There's going to be three guards, right, that play in the playoffs, right? It's really just going to be, right now, if the Suns just stay with what they have, it's going to be Cam Payne, Chris Paul, and Devin Booker, and that's probably it, right?
So then the entire bench is Cam Payne, Dario Saric, and Cam Johnson. I could believe that is the case. I could believe it.
That's the way I look at it now, and I think that's why George Hill is the best piece, because he can play with Cam Payne still, and they can have he can basically play shooting guard. The Suns, basically, their system revolves around having 2 point guards. That's basically why they continually play Etuan Moore and why they're playing him the way that they're playing him. And that's why I like the idea of him. I know there are other options as well, but that's what makes sense to me. He also can play defense in the playoffs. Yeah, so it's I don't know. It's going to be fascinating to talk about that. By the way, Sam, one of the main reasons I wanted to do this, we shifted, for those listening, what we were going to do this morning. This might be the last time we have a conversation like this before trades start being made, whether that be the Suns or other teams. There's not a lot of time to make trades right now. The trade deadline is towards the end of this month, but there's not a lot of time to practice with teams. The schedule's packed for the second half of the season, and teams might want to look to make trades now while they have a few extra days to get ready for the second half of the season. So it's good to get this in now. We'll see what happens. 2 more questions. Let's get to them. It's already getting over an hour here. What new skill will a player develop in the second half? We don't have to spend too long on this one. I brought up the stat with Devin Booker shooting pull-up threes. I hope it's that. I really hope it's that one. I haven't singled out any specific skill. You wanted to have this question on here, Sam. Did you have something specific you wanted to talk about?
I just wanted to find a way to push this guy into the conversation, because I had a feeling we weren't going to really mention him. Do you remember in the preseason when Cam Johnson was like driving and stuff, It felt like there was this small era in the preseason and at the very beginning of the regular season where both Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson were trying to attack rather than just shoot threes. And Mikal, we've seen him continue to do that. Cam, interestingly enough, I feel like he's gotten away from it. And I don't necessarily mind it. Cam's a good shooter. But my thing with Cam Johnson is increasingly it's looking like Cam Johnson is a good shooter. He's not Joe Harris. There's a distinction there. Like, it feels like Cam is one of those 38% three-point shooters. He's good to have in the corner. You feel pretty confident when you see him rise up with it, but he's not Joe Harris. He's not shooting 60% on wide open threes or something ridiculous. So for me, first of all, I think Cam Johnson is an incredibly hard worker, and he's just an easy guy to root for. But also, the more dynamic he can make his offense, the better. I would like to see him continue to expand his offensive game. And there's nothing logical about me saying this necessarily. It's kind of just a hunch. But I feel like we're going to start seeing more hints of it in the second half. I feel like we're going to start seeing a little bit more of Cam Johnson attacking closeouts, a little bit more of him trying to find ways to boost the Suns' half-court offense even more, although it already is very good.
Got to get Eddie Johnson in his ear because he'll tell him to drive every time. Even though Eddie Johnson shot a lot, it's kind of such a weird dichotomy there. He needs to make more threes, by the way. He's shooting 37% from three right now. I thought he would be better at this point of the season. If we're talking about expectations versus reality, I thought Cam Johnson would be shooting closer to 40%. He's shooting worse than last season. He still can get better. He had a rough stretch for a while there, but he needs to make more.
I feel like we were sold on Cam Johnson as like a 6'9" Landry Shamet who was just he was gonna shoot 45% from three and be useless at everything else. And instead, we've gotten this really interesting kind of well-rounded player where shooting is still the primary skill, but it's not elite. It's just pretty good. But everything else, he shows you little flashes of these other things. Pretty good defense. He shows you flashes of a complete player, and you want to bring it out of him because you know that that's going to be the best possible player to have. If you get to the playoffs and the Suns are only running an 8-man rotation, Cam Johnson is definitely in that rotation. He's definitely playing close to 20 minutes per game in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So you want the most well-rounded player possible. And just anything he can add to his game would be nice.
I got one more. DeAndre Ayton passing to cutters, I would like to see.
Yeah.
Because there was one play where he passed to Mikal Bridges in the last game before the...
I've seen him do that to Mikal Bridges twice.
Yeah, and in the past week. It rarely happened before that. Like, rarer. You watch how much it happens with Frank Kaminsky as the big or Dario Saric finding cutters from all over the place. The most rare cases were when DeAndre Ayton held the ball around the elbows. If DeAndre Ayton can get more chemistry with those guys cutting to the rim, first of all, it allows him to be played more, like we talked about, earning his minutes. And two, it just would be a vital development for those guys. If they continue to cut and not get the ball, that does open other guys up. Like, it's not like a completely fruitless effort to cut and not get the ball. But I do think that guys cut with a little more intent when they know the ball could be coming their way. So if he can find ways to find more guys on cuts, specifically Mikal Bridges, but also Devin Booker, that I think would be pretty nice for this team. He has the ball a lot at the top of the key, and for him it's almost entirely dribble handoffs, which are good. That's a good thing to have in their bag, especially when you have Devin Booker and Chris Paul on the team. But the defense knows that's coming. That means that if he can find ways to find cutters, I think that would help a lot. All right, last one. Is Monty Williams ready for the playoffs? I saved this one for last. We haven't had a long Monty Williams conversation. I'm going to tell you. I don't know if
we have time to have a long one anymore.
No,
anyway.
I mean, we could, but we're not going to force people to stick around that long. Let me just say this about how I feel about coaches in general. I tend to not attack coaches in the regular season. There are things I think that I find puzzling sometimes, but I think the goals in the regular season are multifaceted. The goals are, of course, always to win. But I think it becomes a little bit more complicated when you have players that you're trying to teach certain concepts, you're trying to get certain things right for a team in the regular season. So decisions made in the regular season, I don't always attack coaches for. I think Monty Williams has done a relatively good job. I think that the playoffs is where you can judge coaches. That is where adjustments matter the most because there's one goal and one goal only, and that's to win the game. You're no longer trying to develop players. You're no longer trying out new plays in the playoffs. You have your guys, you have your rotations, you're making adjustments based on what the other team is doing, and that's where you can be judged. I'm not sure that I know that Monty Williams is ready for the playoffs. I have not attacked him by design this season in the regular season for decisions he's made, and I'm not going to count some of the weird decisions he's made against him in the playoffs because I think things change so dramatically in the playoffs that is where I will plan on making my judgments about who he is and what he can do. That's basically where I'm at.
You plan on not calling for his head until after the first round exit, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. I think that's where you have to really judge a coach because that's where they earn their money. That's where they matter the most.
No, I understand what you're saying. I'm with you, really. I haven't seen... I think the last time we had this conversation, I even said that, yeah, that element of Monty can't be judged until you get to the playoffs anyway. So it's still like we can't have the adjustment conversation. We don't know if he's going to make adjustments yet because we just haven't seen it. I think there are flashes of good signs, things that project towards being a good playoff coach. I like the fact, you brought up at one point today DeAndre Ayton getting cooked on the perimeter by James Harden, and he got cooked on the perimeter by LaMelo Ball in a different game about a week later too. And I liked to see that because it told me that Monty was already toying with schemes that he knew were going to be important to use in the playoffs. So I like seeing that sort of stuff. And I think, even when it doesn't necessarily always lead to explicit regular season success, any sort of regular season experimentation on the part of Monty Williams, that's been all cool to me so far. But the whole adjustment game, who knows? Who knows? I don't know. We just don't know until he gets into a series. And you can't knock. You can definitely knock some of his rotations so far. The Frank Kaminsky thing is still weird.
No, I totally get that. I really do, but I just don't know the entire. I feel like the entire context is sometimes missing in the regular season for why decisions are made. Whereas in the playoffs, there's so much more obvious. The context is so much more obvious, so it's difficult for me to just fully fault him on that.
Also, the most important thing here is you got to win enough games to command the respect of your entire locker room. I think it's very impressive that Monty Williams has been given a group of 12 or 13 capable NBA players who could play on any given night. He only plays 9 of them. And yet the guys who are on the fringes, the Langston Galloways, the Javon Carters, even the Jay Crowders who lost his starting spot, none of those guys who have been put through kind of weird situations have complained even a little bit because they've put their full faith in Monty. That says a lot about the type of leader of men that he is. And so that's very important. But that's very much a regular season principle scheme thing. And again, kind of can easily fly out the window in the playoffs if he doesn't make the proper adjustments.
Yeah, people commonly underrate the importance of having the respect of specifically the star players on your team and how vital that is for being an NBA coach. You talked about the Nets game and the Charlotte game, and I just want to point out Monty Williams talked about something after that I thought was fascinating. He said that they were trying to completely rethink how to guard guys in the perimeter in the modern NBA, which I loved to hear. But what they were doing, in from what I can tell, we haven't had a discussion about this, is they were having DeAndre Ayton play further up on screens. We talked about it briefly. But the other side of that is they were using Mikal Bridges as a help defender at the rim. And I just find that kind of fascinating because what they're saying is stop the three-point shot at all costs. If DeAndre Ayton can't keep up, then Mikal Bridges is going to slide over as the help defender and try and guard at the rim. It didn't really work, but they just tried it for 2 games really, so I can't say that it's not a viable strategy. But the idea of completely rethinking how to defend with DeAndre Ayton on your team, I think is an interesting one. I think for what DeAndre Ayton can do, probably playing a little further back and counting on his length to still contest threes is probably better, especially against LaMelo Ball. But I kind of liked that they were trying that. I find it great.
And I think no matter who he's playing against, it could be LaMelo, it could be Dame, it could be Steph. I think you do what's worked with DeAndre in the past and trust him to play, socially distanced, basically, play 6 feet back or whatever, And literally, though, and trust his length to still contest that shot and make it somewhat difficult on the three-pointer. Maybe they want to get it up there and challenge him, but you feel good about that contest. And then most importantly, because if you make it too easy for these guards are not the way the Suns were defending them. It acts like they're desperate to take that 3-point shot. They're not that desperate. These guys are willing to drive on you. Dame, Steph, they're willing to drive on you and go all the way to the rim, and they're actually pretty good finishers as well. Otherwise, they wouldn't be the caliber of player that they are. So when you concede the drive to them too easily by just almost playing Ayton up, not giving them an inch of space, and funneling them towards Mikal Bridges, there's going to be someone open on the perimeter every time. You're conceding a rotation to the offense. The ball is inevitably going to find an open shooter somewhere. So, I feel like it's a system where you're so focused on denying the initial three-pointer that you're going to lead to a different open three-pointer. It just might take 10 or 15 seconds to find it. That's how I feel about it.
Right.
That being said, it was worthwhile to try it. And maybe, in future situations, it'll still be worthwhile to try.
Yeah,
But I still think
against certain teams, it might still work.
Switching is still kind of like a liberal attitude in the NBA. It's still like this newfangled method that not everyone uses. So just having DeAndre Ayton switch in the first place, but then having him be a little bit more conservative, drop back just a little, probably works best. I think that probably works best. Obviously, we can't say with any certainty.
The last thing I want to say on this is the idea that Monty needs to find a specific rotation and stick with it, or a specific scheme and stick with it. I also don't really firmly believe either. I really don't, because I do think in the playoffs, you might have to change that rotation up. You might have to start different guys in the playoffs. That commonly happens. The best coaches are the coaches that do that. The Miami Heat started different guys in the playoffs than they started in the regular season. The Miami Heat, by the way, I think is the best coach, didn't even start Goran Dragic, one of their 5 best players in the entire regular season. They're not even starting him this year for a lot of their games. Coaches can change things. Nick Nurse, for example, played 15 different styles of defense at the end of the season that they won in the finals because they wanted to be prepared to try 20 different things once they got to the playoffs. Did it work in the regular season every single time? No, it didn't. You have to try different things. The idea of being open to try things, the idea of being open to play different lineups, I think is actually more important than just sticking with something and staying with it. The best coaches now are the ones willing to try the craziest shit. So I'm not fully convinced that he just needs to stick with something.
I think there's a difference, though. I half agree with you, but I think there's a difference between lineups and lineup combinations versus schemes. When you're talking about schemes, it's the Budenholzer versus Nick Nurse debate.
Right.
Why did the Bucks fail in the playoffs versus why did Nick Nurse tried crazy shit? Sorry, what'd you say?
The Bucks never changed.
The Bucks, yeah, exactly. The Bucks never changed, and the Raptors changed constantly. The Raptors threw every other opponent out of rhythm because they always played a different, pick and roll defense or just defensive style in general. The Bucks never changed at all, and they became exploitable because it was just obvious. That's one thing, and I agree with that. I think it's important to learn how to play different ways. Actually, just finding your lineups, though, I still think there's so much importance in just feeling comfortable with the right guys around you. And I think using those regular season reps to really get guys comfortable with each other, regardless of what scheme they're playing or defensive system they're playing in, I think that stuff is still really important. So I don't know. I feel differently about those two things.
Yeah, and to an extent, I agree with that. But if we're talking specifically about Jay Crowder not starting for a lot of the regular season and then starting in the playoffs, well, that's exactly what Miami did. That's like exactly what they did, and they made the finals with that. So I don't necessarily think that it's a precursor to bad decisions in the playoffs, because we've seen it literally with the same player not necessarily work out that way. That's all I'm saying. I think that there is a chance that it could be bad, that these guys aren't fully familiar with playing with each other. I just think the way that we think about coaching sometimes is not exactly true to reality, where sometimes it is just finding guys that work together in specific matchups in the playoffs that maybe haven't even played a lot of minutes together. That's not that completely insane for how it works in the playoffs. I guess that's really my only point there.
I mean, I think it all comes down to, it's often said about coaching, it's 80-90% just managing egos and personalities. And,
Right.
there are X's and O's involved. There are lineup adjustments to make, but that stuff can sometimes be overrated by fans. And we sometimes overrate the actual day-to-day influence that a head coach has, I think, over any particular team, for sure.
Yeah. And
they're just the easiest scapegoat. And so I sit here and I'm going to be a hypocrite. And if we lose in the first round, I don't think there's anything Monty could do this year to deserve to be fired, for the record. But say, if Monty goes 2 or 3 straight playoff appearances and can't get the Suns out of the first round, inevitably, it sucks to say, but the same thing is going to happen to him as every other coach who does that, right?
Yeah.
Because they are always the easiest scapegoat. It's kind of how the world works.
Well, and like I said, and when you're judging coaches based on the playoffs, I tend to just believe you a little bit more than when you're going over the top in a regular season. Every single loss has been blamed on Monty. Good teams lose games. Every single loss has been blamed on Monty. I don't really do that, and I don't really think that way, but I get it. So the second half of the season starts on Thursday. The first game is against Portland, I believe, which is an important game for the Suns to win as far as trying to get the highest seed possible. It's going to be a fascinating second half of the season. Sam, I'll be honest, I can't wait to cover it with you. It's been really fun to cover this team so far. We covered some pretty shitty teams.
I think we haven't even scratched the surface of like how mind-bogglingly crazy it's about to get for this fan base. We have our little niche community on Twitter that we interact with or whatever, but you can definitely feel it building. Yeah, it's gonna explode in the next couple months. Like it's gonna happen, and I think it's gonna be crazy. But I can't wait to cover it. Should be fun.
I can't wait. So we'll be back after the games come back and have a lot more to talk about, I'm sure. Thanks everyone for listening.
Yeah, I think when I go to these different teams, one thing that I always stress is, Doc used to say it all the time when I played for him. Monty said too, is that it's hard to win in this league, right? It's hard to win one game. So, the thing that separates the really good teams from the not so good teams is execution and, staying the course, like the last 4 minutes, last 5 minutes of the game. And that's important. That's important. You can be as talented as you want. You've been seeing guys sometimes in this league who can go out and get 25, 30 in their sleep. But then it's the last 5 minutes of the game where teams win it or lose it. So we've been really just trying to focus on that, the little things. The little things a lot of times don't show its face until late in the game.
Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, and Thomas Hearns. Legends, whose four-way rivalry defined one of the greatest eras in boxing history. Relive their decade of dominance in the new Showtime sports documentary, The Kings, a 4-part series premiering Sunday, June 6th, only on Showtime.
This episode is brought to you by Ro. Confidence is everything. Women can sense it, and trust me, they love it. But if you're in your head worried about performance, that swag, unfortunately, gentlemen, it's gone. Rose Sparks keeps you ready. When the moment hits, you can step up like a superhero and handle your business. No doubt, just confidence.
Fellas, Rose Sparks gets you ready fast, dissolving under your tongue and working in 15 minutes on average. No waiting, no missing the moment, plus it stays active up to 36 hours.
So when the mood hits, you can go back to back to back, round after round after round. Ro connects guys with medical provider 100% online, so there's no awkward conversation with in-person providers. Go to ro.com/sparks to see if you qualify. If prescribed, new sexual health patients gets $15 off Sparks on reoccurring plan. Connect with the provider at ro.co/fourth to find out if prescriptions Ro Sparks are right for you. That's ro.co/fourth for $15 off your first order. If approved, treatment ships directly to their door. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, and or manufacturing review. For full safety information, go to ro.co/safety info.